Today, we're going to talk about Polygon ID, but specifically the issuers and the issuer node. So again, Polygon ID is providing a huge ZK toolkit for identity, not just in Web3, but also in Web2 and beyond. So it doesn't have to be a blockchain application, but it can be, and it's exciting when we get to combine those two technologies. And I just realized I didn't really introduce myself. GM, everyone, I'm Steph. I'm a DevRel engineer at Polygon Labs, and I'm also Oceans404 on Twitter. So these are some things about me. And I'm going to tell you about these things kind of as claims. So if you're a software developer, like I have been in the past, maybe you think in types or schemas, hint, hint. So I'm going to tell you about some of the types of jobs I've held based on 3 different data types. So who I've been employed by, whether or not it was a technical role, and also my start date. So I'm currently employed by Polygon Labs. I'm in a technical role, and I started last May. Before that, I was employed by Amazon. I was also in a technical role. I was a software developer, and I started that in 2019. And then even before that, I was employed by Sony. It was a technical role, and I started that job in 2018. I won't bore you with the rest of my Web2 history because that doesn't really matter. But these are some things that I can claim that I've done, some jobs that I've held in the past. Here's another claim. This is of a different type. So the previous one was jobs I've held. This type is pet ownership. So do I have a dog? Yes or no? Do I have a cat? Yes or no? And how many pets do I have, which will be an integer. So my pet ownership claim would look something like this. I have a dog. This is true. I don't have a cat, and my pet count is 2. I have 2 animals. And this is my dog, Teddy. I thought this was a pretty goofy picture of him. So how do we know that any of these claims that I've made are true? Especially my employment ones. Like, there's no concept right now of verification on any of those things that I just said. There's no verified stamp that we would see on Twitter or Instagram. So you really don't know for sure that these are true claims. And we can change that with some tech from Polygon ID. But just to give you a little bit of a definition, let's talk about verifiable credentials, or VCs. And the definition of this is one or more claims made by a trusted issuer. So this is documentation straight from W3C, which is like a overarching entity of kind of like web knowledge. And the difference between a claim, like what I just made, and a credential is this verification. So a claim is just an assertion about anything. I could claim that the sky is blue. I could claim that I worked for Amazon. But to turn it into a verifiable credential, an issuer has to sign off on that to say, like, yes, I have issued kind of like a verification stamp that this claim is actually true. And in this world where we're entering with DID and SSI, this is often done with cryptography. And so using cryptographically verified claims, we can turn them into verifiable credentials. And that all starts with a trusted issuer. And so if you remember, this whole session is going to be kind of on Polygon ID issuers and how to start building with issuers. So this part is really important, that the issuer is trusted. So, by the way, this is called a schema, this type that we were talking about before, job held. So just keep that in the back of your mind because it'll come back towards the end. But this is how we can verify that any of these things that I've claimed are actually true. And it's to have an issuer that we trust. So these are 3 of the places that I've worked in the past. And if you had some type of verifiable credentials. Sorry, I can't speak today. It's the morning and I haven't finished my coffee yet, as you can see. But the thing about all of this is, to gain that trust, we have to trust the issuer. If I say that I work for Polygon, you might not believe me. But if Polygon says I work for Polygon, you probably would, because they're a trusted issuer. Same with Amazon or Sony. So employers are an example of someone who could be a trusted issuer to say that any employee actually worked there and then also to verify whether they had a technical role, what was their start date, that kind of thing. And you can have trusted issuers like this for anything. So what if we had a different issuer, and instead of being like my employer or something, Teddy the dog issued me this credential that said I worked for NASA, I'd worked there since 1950, I was in a technical role. Is this issuer trustworthy? No. And that's a problem because none of the verifiers looking at the verifiable credential issued by this issuer are going to trust it because it's not someone they trust. And so this kind of leads us into the triangle of trust. So all of this depends on the verifier being able to trust that the issuer is only giving out verifiable credentials to people who deserve them or people who have earned them for whatever the credential is stating. So Teddy the dog should not be issuing employment verification, but an employer could. And because of that, the issuer, being an employer, is trusted by the verifier because of who they are and kind of the incentives align and all of that. And so then once I have that credential issued to me, I, as the identity holder, can have that in my Polygon ID wallet app or whatever wallet app you were using for your credentials. And then I show that to any verifier, and they could trust that the issuer would only issue that credential to me if I actually met the criteria on whatever it was. So, like I said, this is how it looks in practice, or this is an example of how it could look. So the triangle of trust starts with me, the identity holder. I was employed by Amazon. I was in a technical role, and this was my start date. And let's say that the issuer was George, who happens to be my manager from Amazon. And so George has a DID address, and somewhere in that we can say that it was an Amazon DID address. And so maybe a verifier wants to know whether I've ever held a technical role. This could be my next job, or maybe it's a site like LinkedIn who wants to put a badge on my profile. It could be like a person, it could be an app, it could be a website, it could even be like a NFT claim just for technical people, anything like that. I have the proof in my wallet, my Polygon ID wallet, and I just show that ZK proof to the verifier, and they can verify any piece of information within this. So the question that they're asking is, has Steph held a technical role, yes or no? In this case, technical role is true. So this would resolve to like a yes kind of like statement for them to know that I have had a technical role. And they don't necessarily need to know that where I was employed or my start date. They just want to know this one little piece of information. And so if that all checks out, it's great. And just because we were just talking about trust and trusted issuers, I wanted to call out that when you are verifying, which is something we'll get to in a few sessions, the verifier can decide who to allow. So there's this allowed issuers field when you're verifying. And so you could specify just certain DIDs so that not everyone, including Teddy the dog, could issue me a credential saying where I had worked. And so if you wanted to check this out and get a little bit ahead of yourself, you could check out our verifier API docs. And like I said, there's this within the query as a verifier, you can pass through allowed issuers. So that can be everyone, which is what the star is for, or it could just be specific DIDs. And this is what you would be proving against. Okay, so I wanted to have a little fun and tell you about a famous issuer that I think we all know about, and that is the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter. All the characters, if you haven't read Harry Potter, when they get to school for the first time, they sit in this chair and they put on the sorting hat, and the sorting hat says one of 4 houses. And Harry is famously in House Gryffindor. So the sorting hat has done some type of check and established things about Harry's qualities and has given him a label, House Gryffindor. And so he can take that with him and use it to show any verifier that he has access rights to certain things. So if he's going through to the magic door in front of the Gryffindor common room, he can say, I'm a Gryffindor, and it will let him in the common room. So showing his VC that was issued by a trusted issuer unlocks access to the Gryffindor common room. Same thing if he's trying out for the Quidditch team, which is kind of like some combination of, I don't know, soccer, air hockey, something like that played in the sky. So the team captain is only going to let people who are Gryffindors on the team. So if he is able to prove this, then he is eligible for the Quidditch team. And obviously in Harry Potter, there was no concept of a Polygon ID wallet or anything like that. But I imagine that if there was, it would look something like this. So inside of Harry's Polygon ID wallet app on his phone, he would have all of his data. So maybe his proof of personhood or world ID, an about me claim, and also his house from the Sorting Hat. So you can see the type is house and the issuer is Sorting Hat because that's who had issued that credential. And the really cool thing about holding all of these different verified credentials is that you can reuse them multiple times, and you don't have to, when you're trying out for the Quidditch team, bring the Sorting Hat along with you, put it back on your head, say, see, it said Gryffindor. All you have to do is use a ZK proof, which is pretty cool to me. So I had hinted at this before, but all of these different credentials are held in your Polygon ID wallet app. So it looks something like this. I'll show a download link for the Apple app and also the Android app in a second. But just to tell you a little bit about this wallet app, it's a digital wallet that holds all of your different VCs, and it interacts with the issuer. So from your wallet app, you can like interact with an issuer to get these claims to put in your wallet. And then from there, you interact with any service via QR codes to share your ZK proofs based on any of these verified credentials. So this is just a Polygon at the Pit example that I had created earlier. So Polygon at the Pit was this accelerator event in Singapore. So during the accelerator, people built different projects and they had to be accepted into the accelerator. So I thought it would be cool if we issued credentials to these builders to let them into the pit. So the credential offer looked something like this. So they would scan a QR code to claim, and they would say how many projects they had built, and that would get added to their wallet. So you can see this is the claim that's being added. And then now this builder has a piece of data, their data in their wallet, and it says, are they allowed in the pit, which is the Boolean field? Yes, which is true. Projects built, 420. I don't know if they had actually built 420 projects, but got to do it for the culture. And then the proof type was BJJ signature, which we'll get into a little bit later. And then this is the issuer ID. These are now DIDs, which I'll show you in a little bit. But this is what it looks like for the user carrying these credentials around. And then once they go to verify, they can generate proofs based on all of these different claims. So maybe if you have that Polygon at the Pit claim, you can get into the happy hour. So maybe someone at the happy hour door scans your claim within your wallet and says, okay, yes, you are allowed in because you've built more than one project, and you also have access to Polygon at the Pit. So that's kind of like a real world example of how this could work. Okay, so if you don't have the mobile app for Polygon ID wallet app, I encourage you to scan and get it now. There's an Apple App Store app and also a Google Play Store app. Either of those will work for today. So I'll give everybody just a second for that. And these apps were updated pretty recently. So if you have already downloaded it in the past, I would encourage you to just like run the update so you get the most up-to-date mobile app. Cool. By the way, any questions so far? I haven't been looking at the chat. Pit gang. Oh. I see one question or one raised hand. Go for it.
do you have the credibility as such for any contribution from apart from Polygon employees as such? Who will own the IP
Sorry,
also?
do you mind typing your question into the chat and then maybe Alex could answer it? I didn't fully hear it. Sorry about that. But
Sorry,
please type it into the chat and then Alex can respond in there.
So are you asking about examples of projects? I think that was a question. Okay, I'll wait for the written question.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation, but feel free to keep jamming in the chat. Okay, so hopefully everybody's got the wallet app downloaded now too. Gave everybody a minute to do that. So this is the code that we're going to be looking at today. It's the issuer node. And this is something that is pretty new because it's like self-hosted and you can see all of the code, and you can also use this to host your own APIs and then use those for your applications. So there's two different things to scan if you want to get a little more information, if you're the type of person who likes to look at the code while you're learning, which I know I am. So this is the QR code to the actual code, the GitHub repo. And then this is the QR code for the docs that explain the issuer node GitHub. So I'm just going to open these both. So I've got them on my desktop, and then I'll keep going. Okay. And then I'll show this one more time at the end. So if you decide, oh, I wanted that code, don't worry, it'll come back. Okay. So we're going to get into the self-hosted issuer node. And this is a self-hosted node that any implementer can use to set it up and then integrate all of the different APIs into their application. So this is created using Docker. So you'll have like a bunch of different Docker containers if you choose to host this locally just to start playing with it. Like I did, you can see I'm just hosting this at localhost 3001. But this exposes all of those different functionalities. And if you had used the previous version of Polygon ID, where we had kind of like a UI and different APIs, you probably are somewhat familiar with this, but now you can run this on your own and host it on your own, and make more decisions on like the architecture if you want to. This is kind of just an example of how you could do it. But like I said, this provides all of those endpoints that you'll need when you're creating any type of issuer applications. So these are some of the different functionalities that the issuer node provides. So the first thing is you can create, manage, and revoke an identity. An identity is like a DID identity. So the format is DID : whatever it looks like. It's similar to an address, but it's a DID address. And then, so you can create identities for either your issuer, which has its own identity, or yourself. You can also issue credentials to a specific identity. So maybe instead of giving out a credential to anyone who wants to accept it, you want to send it to a specific identity, you can do that so that only one person can claim, and it has to be the identity that you've issued to. Another thing you can do is share credentials with a user's wallet via QR code. So you might have seen this a couple slides ago where you scan to claim the credentials. You can also publish identity states on chain, and you also have the ability to revoke credentials. So if, like for an employment credential, if I should only have that credential while I work there so I can get into buildings, and I no longer work there, my employer could revoke the credential so I don't have, let's say, like Amazon building access, if that was the example. So all of these different things are things that you can do within the issuer node. And we also have API references for all of these APIs that are self-hosted by you. So I'm just going to click into this to show you some of those. So API reference is right here for the issuer node. So the first things are all related to identity, so identity creation. And like I said, I'm just going to make this a tiny bit, oops, too big. This is an example of what an identifier looks like. So it starts with the DID colon, and then it has the method. Right now, it's either Polygon ID or ident3, which was the company that created Polygon ID and kind of got absorbed into our ecosystem. Then you have the network, which is Polygon, and then Mumbai is the testnet. So we have testnet, and now we also have mainnet. And then this is the actual kind of like address or identifier that an identity would have. So that's creation of an identity. You can also get all of the identities of a user. So users don't have to just have one DID. You can have tons if you want to, which is kind of cool because you're not locked into just having one address. You can also publish state on chain. So identity state if you're using claims that have Merkle trees. And those are all the identity APIs. The next set of APIs is related to claims. So these are all of those kind of like claims that you would issue to either specific people or to anyone who wants to claim them. And an example of when maybe you would want to issue something to everyone would be like if you're in a room and you want to issue everyone a verified credential that's similar to a POAP. So you want everyone there to be able to claim it. You don't necessarily care to go one by one. So that's just a reason that you would not specify an identity to when you were issuing a claim. So first thing you can do is create a claim. So you would pass it the schema, and we'll get into schemas next. But the schema looks like all of those types that we had talked about with my employment claim. And then also all of the parameters for the schema, depending on what you want within that claim. Next one is get claim, which is pretty self-explanatory. You're just getting a claim for a specific person or identity. Get claims, so multiple claims for that one. Get claim QR code if you wanted the QR code to issue someone directly instead of having like a different type of response. Revoke claim if you wanted to take away someone's verified credential, like we talked about in the example, if you no longer worked for someone and they wanted to revoke your access to something. Get revocation status if you want to see whether or not a claim has been revoked. And that looks like it's all of the different claim APIs. And then last but not least, there's a bunch of agent APIs. This is when you're communicating between the mobile app and the server. So you're using like the agent endpoint to send tokens to the mobile app. You can see kind of like an example response for that here. Yep, so these are all of the different APIs, and these are exposed, and I'll show you that in just a minute when I actually run the issuer node so that you can see kind of like how you interact with these from the issuer node. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is schemas and schema examples. This was the schema we started with. It was a job held schema, just an example from earlier. Remember we had employed by, which is a string, which was the company. Also, whether or not the role was technical, Boolean, and start date integer. This is what a schema for just a single Boolean looks like, just to simplify things a little bit further. We'll look at the actual schema raw JSON here. But the type of this schema is coding experience credential. So basically, really simple. Do you have coding experience? Yes or no. It's a Boolean field. So the body of this request has the credential schema, and we'll look at that full schema in just a second. You can see there's a type coding experience credential. The credential subject has the ID of the person who's getting this, I believe, and also the coding experience, whether that's true or not. There's an expiration date for this. And one more interesting thing that we'll get into briefly is whether it's a signature proof or an MT, which is a Merkle tree proof. So let's look at the actual raw schema here. Okay, so this is the full schema. There's two sets of JSON here, so the JSON LD and then just the JSON. You can see some types that are required. These are all kind of like Polygon ID things that you don't have to worry too much about. But if you're creating your own custom schemas, you just want to know to include these things. You can see there's an issuance date, an expiration date, credential schema. And then the most interesting part of this is towards the bottom. Okay, so you can see down here, I'll just zoom in on this for a minute. Credential subject. So it's a type of object and you see what's required. So we need that ID and we also need coding experience, the field, and those properties are defined below. So the title of the ID is credential subject ID, and then the coding experience is a Boolean. So this is what that full schema looks like. And we would feed this to the issuer so that the issuer understands how to create these types and issue the correct type of credential, so that if a verifier is like, hey, does anyone have a coding experience, or I'm looking for a coding experience credential with these types, you can really easily tell, okay, does someone hold this type of credential, yes or no? And then within the credential, is coding experience true, yes or no? So that is why schemas are pretty important. And then the other thing about these is that we have the signature proof or empty proof. So in this case, a signature proof is true, empty proof is false. There are two different credential issuance methods. So the first type is that signature proof, a BJJ signature, and the second type is MTP. I can say letters, I promise, method, which is Merkle trees. And you can go a lot deeper into both of these here if you scan this QR code. I'm going to go over this at a very high level because it's pretty mathy and I just don't have enough knowledge about that yet. But the first type is BJJ signature. And this is basically like the issuer is signing to say, yes, this is a valid proof. So this would kind of be the timeline and the participants. So first, a user generates the proof from their Polygon ID wallet. The verifier validates that information using the BJJ signature that is provided when the issuer has signed it. So the user and the verifier are the participants for that. The signature was added by the issuer when they issued the credential. And I think this is really funny. It's called BJJ signature, but it's Baby Jub Jub, which sounds like something from Star Wars or something. I found this out and I had like a solid 2-minute laugh. But all you have to know about Baby Jub Jub is that it's proved with a signature. And BJJ, Baby Jub Jub, what? This is true. Like you can read this full paper about it here, and hopefully you get as much of a kick of it out of it as I did, and probably you'll understand more of like the really deep math that goes into this. I mean, look at this definition of a Baby Jub Jub. P equals this long number. I pretty much stopped there, if I'm being honest, trying to understand what Baby Jub Jub was, but I really enjoyed it nonetheless. So if you're inclined, please read the very real research paper about Baby Jub Jub that's co-authored by Doherty, who is the founder of ZK EVM and Polygon ID, but hopefully you enjoy that. And then the other type is Merkle tree proof method. So this is a little different, and it's cool because through this method, if you wanted to, you could issue credentials from smart contracts because there's a proof generated, the verifier validates the information, and all of this, the hash for this is published on chain. So you don't have to worry too much about this unless you wanted to get, excuse me, really deep here. We're just going to go over that the Baby Jub Jub signature method because that's what most of the different schemas are using. But just know that you could also do this and use the Merkle tree proof method if you wanted to, and especially if you wanted smart contracts to be able to issue these credentials to users for whatever reason for your use case. Okay, so going back to schemas for just a second, like I said, the signature proof being true means that baby Jub Jub is in use, not the Merkle tree proof. And that seems to be the case for most of the examples. So we're just going to go with that. Okay, so back to the actual issuer node. These are the different components, and they've all been Dockerized. And so I will let my lovely ex-coworker, who I miss dearly, explain to you all the architecture of the issuer node. This is a pretty quick video, but he does a great job, so I'm just going to play the video instead of talking about it.
For any identity. The issuer node works as a Docker container that can be run and lets you self-host your own server. And from this server, it exposes a set of API needed to run an issuer. It's very important for it to be self-hosted in order for you not to give up control on your keys and on the credential and the data that you're going to issue and create. So now let's go through the main APIs made available. The first one is an API to create the private key for the issuer. So basically, the private key is the thing that allows you to control your identity and to authenticate as an issuer. And from this private key, there's like a DID, which is a public and unique identifier that is only associated with you as an issuer. The second API exposed through the issuer node API is the possibility to create credential. So basically, it means filling up a credential with data and with the identifier of the user that is going to receive a credential. So if we think about a driver license, this would be filled up with the name of the receiver, the date of birth of the receiver, the class of driver license of the receiver, and of course, its identifier. So this is issue credential. The third API allows an issuer to store this credential inside the database such that it can be retrieved and fetched at a later point in time. The third API allows an issuer to speak with users' wallet and to share credential with them. And this can be shared in a form of a QR code or, for example, via an hyperlink. And the fifth API is the one that revokes claim. So basically, the action of revoking means basically canceling the functionality of a credential, and this happens speaking with the blockchain. To revoke a credential, the issuer needs to make a transaction to the blockchain that will update their state, and in this state, this information of a credential being revoked will be made available to the public. So that's why we need a blockchain to do that. So these were the main functionality of the issuer. And as you can see, through the issuer node API, an issuer can manage the whole life cycle of a credential.
Thanks, Ayush. Okay, so that was kind of an explanation of all of the different things that the issuer node APIs are able to do. Next, let's get straight back into the actual issuer node, and I'll show you what it looks like and how I've self-hosted it. Okay, looks like my screen is sharing. So we're back on this code page, so feel free to scan the code in the docs if you want either of those. I'm just going to go straight to the code repo, which is right here. So this is the self-hosted issuer node code, and you can get started with this by cloning the repo. So you can clone it. And then there's a few things you need to do for Docker setup. The first thing is you create some environment variables. So I'll show you mine in a minute. Then you run make up basically, and that launches the different Docker containers that have Postgres, Redis, and the Vault. You need the vault so that you can store your private key so that you can sign as the issuer for those BJJ signatures, or if you're doing something on chain, you can put things on chain. One thing to call out is there's two different types of commands depending on what type of chip you have in your MacBook. So if you have a silicon chip for M1s and M2s, most of the commands end in -arm, so run-arm instead of just make run -arm. And then you can follow the different steps to add your private key to the vault and encrypt it, and also to create a DID for your issuer. That's that identity that your issuer needs to have. And then you can run the actual APIs. And also there's this front end that's been created on top of the APIs. So I'll show you that. These are hosted in 3 different places. So there's 2 sets of APIs hosted on localhost 3001 and localhost 3002. And then there's also a web UI for creating all of your claims and also uploading schemas and things like that. So we'll go through all of that. Let me just show you my code that I've got locally. So this is all of the code locally. These are the different env files that I created. The main things that you need to add to the env file, and this is called out in the documentation, are your, let me go to it. If you wanted to host using ngrok to have the APIs be publicly accessible, you would add your server URL here. I just have like an ngrok running, and it is, really quick. It's just pointing my localhost 3001 to a public URL so that anyone can look at this link. And that way, if I have a front end or something I'm hosting to create my own issuer, I can use these APIs and just point to this link as the endpoint if I want to. So I have that. And then the other thing that I needed to add was an RPC URL endpoint for Polygon Mumbai. I used Alchemy, but you can use Anchor, QuickNode, anything you want here, as long as it's pointing at Mumbai if you wanted to connect to the testnet, which I did. When you run through creating or like putting your private key inside of the vault, it will spit out an issuer key store token. So this was mine for my test account. And then you'll also run a command locally to generate a DID, and that goes in here. So this was my issuer DID for my account for my issuer. And these are all coming from commands that you run. It's all documented, which is awesome. So for example, that issuer command is just like make generate issuer DID arm, and it outputs your DID for your issuer. So all of this is beautifully documented, so you can run through this yourself and spin up these different things in Docker. But next I'll go through and I'll just show you what is actually created. So the first thing is localhost 3001. So this is the API server. This has that first set of APIs. Remember, we had talked about the different identity ones. In order to use this, you need to authenticate. So within your .env file, you'll have a username and password. I'm just using the defaults that were set from the API sample, which is fine for this test use case. So I'm just going to grab user API from here. And also password API, also just the same ones that are set in the sample that I've copied over. And now I have an API key. Since I'm authenticated, I can create an identity using these APIs if I want to. So I could try this. Oh, unauthorized. Let's see. Usually this works just fine for me. I must be doing something funky. Let's see if I can get identities for this one really quick. Okay, so there's something funky going on with authorization. Let me just refresh. I'll try that one more time. But since I'm already in the commands line, I can actually run these with like curl commands, which they also give you. So let me just try that instead. Where did they go? So I've set that. And then for some reason, I've lost where the curl commands are for these. Let me just try it from the second set of APIs. Where are the curl commands? I swear they were here. This is what happens in live demos. But here's an example of one of the curl commands that is right here. I'm not sure why suddenly they've disappeared in the other thing. I might have accidentally changed something weird. But what you can do is run these all from your command line to get the different things. They're just APIs that you're hitting. So you can see that I've run some other ones. This is a curl for a different get that I got an unauthorized for. I'll need to debug this, but I might have accidentally changed my password or something because I was playing around with this. But basically, once you're logged in with your authentication, based on whatever is in your .env file, you can use any of these APIs to create identities, to get identities, and to use the UI that's also spun up for you. So let's see if I can just use this from the actual UI. So I had the one set of APIs on this port. I have a second set on port 3002. And then I also have this created. So localhost 8088 spins up for you. So you can use this front end to create all of your credentials. And this is all within the Docker. So you don't have to create this yourself. You can either draw inspiration from this to create your own front ends, or you can just use the APIs that you have hosted here and host them using like AWS or some type of thing so that you can publicly access them when you're creating front ends. But this is what the UI looks like that goes with the issuer API. So we have one schema already. It's KYC age credential. So I'll just show you the details of that here. You can see it looks similar to that raw schema that we had for coding experience, but it's displayed a lot prettier. So you can see all of these different things. And the credential subject for this one has an ID, it has a birthday, and also a document type. And I can issue credentials based on this. So if I wanted to issue a credential, I could either directly issue it to a DID. So if I knew someone's DID, I could do that directly here, or I could just use a credential link so that anyone could claim this. So for this KYC age credential, I'm just going to say the birthday is 1990 and it's October 10th. Document type, this is just an arbitrary value that was added to this credential schema. This doesn't really matter. It says type integer. I'm just going to say 42. And then remember, you can either do a signature-based or a MTP, Merkle tree proof. So I'm just going to stick to signature and create that credential link. Here's the link. And you can see it's hosted here on my local host 8088. So in its state right now, I can't send it to you or anyone else to be able to claim it. I need to have an actual hosting solution. So whatever your cloud service provider of choice is, you would just put these APIs up so that you could also use the website to send out your credentials if you wanted to. So I'll just show you what this looks like from here. As my issuer wants to send you a credential, and I can scan this credential with my iPhone within my Polygon ID app. So this is my Polygon ID app, and I can claim this into my wallet. And then I'll have this to verify against if I wanted to check my age against a verifier. So I'm just going to show you how to create a custom schema or something that's not an age credential. Because I think the most interesting things you can do with Polygon ID all happen when you kind of get creative with schema creation and also eventually like verifying, which we'll go over in a future workshop. But back to my issuer, I'm just going to schemas. I'm going to import a schema. So if you remember, we had that coding experience schema. This was the long JSON kind of like blob of the full schema. So in order to provide a schema, you have to be hosting it somewhere, because this link is what will be referenced by anyone who wants to understand what the coding experience schema looks like. So I'm grabbing this link and I'm just going to import it using the URL to JSON schema by fetching. So it's read through this link and realized, okay, this is a coding experience credential, and it's importing all of these fields. So similar to the other one, we have a credential subject ID and coding experience. And those match the properties from this object here. I'm going to import this. And now we have a second type of schema that we could issue credentials for. So we looked at the details already. I'm just going to issue one. I guess I'll issue it directly to myself. I think I have my DID. I sent it to myself. Let's see. I also sent a funny gluten-free meme to myself. I have a friend who's gluten-free. She could have a is gluten-free credential if she wanted to, but it was just a funny gluten-free joke that I enjoyed. Okay, so I'm going to directly issue this coding experience credential to myself by pasting in my identifier. You can see that that Boolean field is coming up. So do I want to issue myself true or false? I'll go true. And I'll set the date to, this is the expiration, by the way. I'll say that it expires in 2026. Hopefully I'm still coding in 2026, but we'll see. And this is directly issuing the credential to me. So I think it's going to take a minute, but I should see that in my wallet. I believe I have to accept it. And I hear a couple pings in the chat. Somebody said, it's cool to see Polygon ID is getting so mature. Polygon ID is growing up. We love to see it. Okay.
Steph,
Yeah.
do we have a minute? I think someone has a hand raised. Yeah, Ayush, go ahead.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Steph. I wanted to ask one thing. Let's say I can issue something to myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say issuer is issuing, for example, email, okay, email thing, like whoever owns a particular email, right? So let's say I am issuing that thing, and if I write, let's say yours email, then also that will come to me, right?
You were saying if you wanted to issue a credential saying that you owned an email?
Yes.
Are you saying that you want to send yourself the credential by sending you an email? I don't think we have that functionality in place right now, but I do know that you can deep link. So maybe based on that, you could send someone the deep link to the claim, and then they would have it just in their email. Is that kind of what you were thinking? Or
no, basically I was stuck somewhere, like I was building this platform, so I was stuck at a place where I have to verify that I have to issue a credential to a different user, but at the same time I don't want that person to fill in the details of any other person.
got it.
Yeah.
So by details, do you mean the you don't want someone to be able to like let's say you know that it's my email, but I send that credential to someone else that claims that it's their email, kind of like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Alex, do you have any insight there?
Can you repeat, sorry, the question? I didn't understand.
I think he wants to know what's to stop someone from giving out that credential to someone else. So if they've done all of if they work with the issuer, but then they give it to their friend who's sitting next to them, and so their friend puts it in the friend's Polygon ID wallet, even though, like, is there any way to stop that behavior?
So that someone shares the credentials with someone else, which is not the real holder.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, at the end of the day, when you issue a credential to a wallet, to a holder, you issue it to a certain DID, right?
Yes.
So if you share that credential with another holder, they will not have the private key for that DID. So it will not work, right?
Yeah, but my question is, let's say I want to know age verification only, if the person is above 18 or not. So I have issued a credential to a particular DID, and there is a boolean value, either it's true or false, right? Now the person will fill like true or false. What if the person is filling it wrong? That's what I was asking. That is my question.
If the issuance of the credential is wrong,
Yes.
if the issuance of the credential is wrong, then it's nothing you can do because the issuance is wrong. But normally how it works with age is an issuer will issue your birth date into your wallet, right? And then it's in the wallet where you generate the zero knowledge proof to the verifier. So the holder is the one who has all the information in his wallet, and he's the one deciding which information will disclose to a certain verifier. So in the new version we have now, we have something called selective disclosure. Before we only could say yes or no, right? The verifier would ask, "Are you over 18?" And then the holder, the wallet, will say yes or no, right? Now we can give also the information behind that statement.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one more thing, Alex. So, for a issuer to issue a particular, for a issuer to issue something to a particular DID, issuer will keep all of the DIDs, like will have the database of all of the DIDs, right? Or it will be like, it will be not there, like.
Yes, and I'm not sure if Steph, you're going to show that. There is also something called connections, where you keep the connection with that holder, so you don't have to establish the connection every time. You keep this connection with the identity holder, with the holder that you have sent that credential. So you don't need to establish that connection every time.
Yeah, we're running a tiny bit low on time, but I can just show that really quick. So you can see all of the in the issuer UI here that we have hosted, you can see schemas, you can see credentials that you've issued, and then you can also see those connections. And that happens when you issue credentials to users. I didn't accept the credential in my wallet yet, so you don't see that credential here.
Understood. Okay, understood.
But I believe the connections would also be where you could revoke. Is that correct, Alex?
Yeah, the credentials where you can revoke, exactly.
So these are all those connections to the credentials that you've issued people.
Got it. So all of these things, can we do this with the SDK also? Like I was trying to do, like, run the tutorial which was there, but there was some issue with the SDK. So I just wanted to confirm that. Like,
So
is
now,
it from my
because of
side?
the self-hosting of this, you have to host the APIs yourself. And that's so that you, as the issuer, keep that data private and it's not given to like Polygon ID in any way.
Okay.
I'm not sure if in the tutorials are the demo systems available.
So there was this tutorial on the official repository. So I was trying to run it locally. So I followed the README, but there was some issue with the SDK. So I just wanted to confirm that if that issue was from my side, or like, there's something going on the back end.
Okay, but no.
We would have to look into it, but
Yeah.
I believe that you have to use your own like APIs that you've created, like these.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you host your APIs and then you would make the requests to wherever you had hosted them, either through like curl or like whatever, however you were doing it on your front end or back end.
Yes, just to finish off, no? I was looking at the tutorials, and in this site here, in the link that I'm sending, you have the link to the demo issuer we have hosted. So I think in case you don't want to, just to start with, you don't want to install the whole issuer node, you just want to test it. Here you have a link to the demo issuer somewhere. If you go up, I think it was at the very beginning.
Yeah. So the demo issuer playground you can play with.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll post this link. This is the link to the actual playground. And once you've done this, there's also a demo verifier.
Correct.
So you can check that it actually verifies whether it's the birthday or whatever else that the proof part is working.
Okay. There's just a link that I shared like right now. This is the tutorial I was trying to follow.
But this is not our project, Netjar. This is not our, and this is a JS SDK project.
Yes.
As far as I can see, JS SDK is the JavaScript library where you have issuer functionalities and wallet functionalities. It's has been created to do, for example, web browser extensions.
Oh, okay.
That is one of the goals of this JS SDK. We will talk about this component on the 2nd of June, together with the wallet SDK. That will be the goal of the 2nd of June. So it's not really the goal of today's session.
Yeah.
A lot to learn. Step by step.
The other thing is there were changes made about on the 2nd of May, I believe. So I noticed that this repo is about, last change was 3 weeks ago. So I'm hoping that it incorporates those changes, but it might have a bug because of the changes to Polygon ID that happened on the 2nd.
Yeah,
understood.
The JSDK is in beta stage, so it's not yet fully productive, but you can find the information already in the tutorials. So this is documented in the tutorials, but it's not a fully productive version. So it's a beta version. So you still can find some issues, some bugs.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks to you for the questions.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so we're about 5 minutes over and I'm pretty much at the end of my demo, but please pull down this code from GitHub and play with it yourself and let us know if specific things aren't working. I saw in the chat somebody said that every time you refresh the UI page, you lose the authorization. So that might have been what I was facing when I was trying to work with those different APIs. It seems like maybe I have to start Docker again or something. I'll look into that and I'll post kind of a message updating you all in the Telegram chat. But going back to my slides, this was that last slide that had the docs and also the code if you wanted to like take a screenshot or anything of this. But otherwise, this is the QR code to the full deck of slides from today. I'll also send it to Ayush to forward to you all. But thank you so much for joining and learning about the Polygon ID issuer node and issuer. We're really excited about all of the updates, and it's just going to keep getting better and better, and the developer experience will improve even more. So yeah, thanks. Keep giving us feedback and letting us know what we can do to make your lives easier as developers, what features are missing, or any bugs you encounter, because we want to get that figured out for you before we start the official ID-thon challenge that Ayush can talk a little bit more about. But yeah, thank you so much.